Well-sealed windows. No other country can make such well-sealed and nice windows. This apparently was Angela Merkel's answer to a question asked by a journalist more than a decade ago, when the journalist asked her what she most associated with Germany. And that's the kind of detail that we expect in a column from The Rest is History's top pundit, Dominic Sandbrook, who is here with me. And Dominic, you wrote this article, I think, just before the elections that were on Sunday.
That's right. It's on Saturday, yeah.
That will be bringing the curtain down on Angela Merkel's 16-year reign as Chancellor of Germany. So we thought we'd do a kind of guerrilla look at not just Angela Merkel, but the entire history of post-war German democracy. And this is obviously a subject that particularly interests you.
Well, I think, like everybody in Britain, I was on the edge of my seat for the German federal elections. I know it's something that's...
it did seem to me that people in England and Britain were more interested in this.
Do you think so? I don't think...
I do, yes. I think it's loads of articles about Merkel, about Wither Germany, all that kind of stuff.
Well, it may be in the broadsheets, but I think it's a really interesting thing that people in Britain get so interested in American presidential elections, generally.
The BBC do.
And, you know, these sort of incredibly consequential elections in the biggest, most powerful, most economically dynamic state in Europe kind of passed most people by. I mean, most people couldn't name the leaders of the CDU or the SPD, the two big German parties. Could you name them, Tom? I don't actually think I could.
Of course you could.
I think it's a really interesting and revealing thing. And actually, German politics is much... I mean, it has this reputation in Britain of being just stupefyingly bland.
Isn't that the point, though?
But I think this is the point, and this is historically really interesting.
The point that you make in your article about Merkel is that, in a sense, the kind of the cosy tedium is precisely the point, because, of course, it's being set in contrast to what had happened up till 1945.
Exactly. So when our producer said, you know, why don't you do something about Angela Merkel's departure and German politics? And I started thinking about the German post-war chancellors. I mean, they're all against the backdrop of the war. Indeed, both world wars, in one way or another. I mean, they've all got the war in their personal history or in their family background. And actually, it turns out to be colossally more interesting than you think. And the blandness, the ordinariness, and the humdrum nature of German politics is, as you absolutely say, it's part of the point. It's deliberate.
And, of course, Merkel has the communist period growing up in East Germany as well. So all the chancellors have, as this kind of backdrop, the experience of fascism and communism.
Exactly. So I think what we should do, Tom, is rattle through the chancellors first. So to give people a sense of the context, because I think that's really important and interesting. And then probably in the second half or so, we'll see how we do. We can get on to Merkel. How does that sound?
That sounds an excellent plan.
Okay, so I'll kick off. Germany in 1945, actually, just to think about the facts and figures of it is astonishing. So there's 5 million people dead. There's 9 million men in Western Allied or Soviet prison camps. So Germany is, you know, to an extent that we in Britain, with our sort of, you know, we sort of get very misty-eyed about Coventry Cathedral and the Blitz and all this sort of stuff. But this is a completely different order of magnitude of destruction, but also of kind of a moral destruction, you know, this sort of moral humiliation.
The country is on the verge of being divided.
Yeah, it's about to be divided between sort of Allied and Soviet zones. In Berlin, 4,000 people are dying every day of disease in the second half of 1945. So the Germans call this Stunde Null, so 0 hour. But they mean that in that's got a kind of ambiguous meaning, because on the one hand, it means kind of they're absolutely in the depths of degradation and despair. But at the same time, they like to think of this, and it's projected to them as a clean break with the Nazi past, which is a bit of which is a complete myth, actually, because as we'll see, there are tons of Nazis around, they don't all disappear.
No, and one of them becomes Chancellor.
Becomes Chancellor, exactly.
Yeah, we'll come to him. But Dominic, have you read this new book that's just come out in English by Volker Ulrich, who wrote a great biography of Hitler? 8 Days in May, How Germany's War Ended.
So I haven't read this. Have you read this, Tom?
I have. I actually just read it just before the idea for this podcast got suggested, which is why I was ready to say, yes, okay, let's do it. Because, it's full of, it's brilliant. It's kind of pointillist depiction of the last 8 days between the suicide of Hitler and the kind of complete surrender of Germany.
So it's the kind of Dönitz government, isn't it?
Yes, so Dönitz is kind of supposedly in power, but you have all these kind of little portraits of different people, say people from the Nazi regime, people who are its victims, and Germans who were opposed to Nazism. So you get these portraits of various people who will become leading players in the history of the Federal Republic. One of whom, of course, is Konrad Adenauer, who will become the first Chancellor of the Federal Republic. But there's an amazing description of how he gets brought by the Americans to become mayor of Cologne, and he sees the cityscape of Cologne, and it's absolutely flattened. The cathedral is devastated. Buildings are totally, and he can't comprehend how the city could be rebuilt. And the Americans say, no, we must. You must rebuild it. And so he puts his shoulder to that particular wheel. But the sense that even Adenauer, who plays such a crucial role in getting Germany back on its feet, his first instinct is to say it can't be done.
Well, this is the extraordinary thing. So there's another book that I read called, came out this year, also translated into English, called Aftermath by a guy called Harold Jena. And he talks in that book, it's basically the 10 years after the war. So a lot of it is about denazification and the lack of and so on. But he has a whole chapter about rubble. And basically there is so much rubble, so many buildings have been destroyed, that clearing it up is the work of years. And it's this colossal kind of national effort.
To begin with, it's the women who have to do it.
Right, exactly, because all the men are away. Because all the men are in. I mean, it's an absolutely mind-blowing story, which doesn't really get told in the West, because it's, we won, the Germans lost, hurrah, hurrah, end of story. And in Germany, the way they told that story themselves was pretty distorted. So in his book, Aftermath, Jena says basically they repressed all memory of everything they'd done, or we repressed, rather, he says. And he says, we coped by casting ourselves as victims.
But having said that, I mean, there are heroes. And I think Adenauer does rank as a hero, doesn't he?
So Adenauer is the let's get into him. He's such a titanic figure. So when the Germans had a competition called Unsere Besten, they had a big vote where 3 million people voted. It was the equivalent of the Great Britain's contest that the BBC had at the beginning of the 21st century, to find the greatest German in history. And Adenauer won. Do you know who came second? You'd like this?
Well, I'm guessing who didn't come second.
He was banned.
Goethe.
No, Martin Luther.
Oh, excellent. Yes,
Karl Marx came third, interestingly. Anyway, Adenauer. So Adenauer is an extraordinary man. He is ridiculously old when he takes office. So he becomes Chancellor in 1949. This is when West Germany is finally up on its feet. He's 73 years old. He was born in 1876. Yeah. And he'd been, you say about the Americans making him mayor of Cologne, he'd been deputy mayor of Cologne in 1909. I mean, imagine a man who'd been in politics in Britain.
He'd been mayor of Cologne from 1917, hadn't he?
Yes, he had.
Up to the Nazis taking power.
So you'll like him, no doubt, because his religion is very important to him. Absolutely. He's a Catholic. He's a Rhinelander. He's been part of the Centre Party. I mean, the great formational moment in Adenauer's political development was Bismarck's Kulturkampf against the Catholic Church. And he hates the Prussians as a result of this.
Well, Dominic, I know that I kind of bring this theme up every time, but would you not say that looking at the history of post-war Germany, the Catholic and Protestant dimensions to it are actually incredibly, and even looking at the electoral map, we're recording this on Monday, so the day after the election, and you have this kind of the CDU, the Conservative Union founded, that Adenauer kind of led from the beginning. So very Catholic, kind of concentrated in the south, where historically Catholics have been concentrated, and the SPD
in the north. Yes,
so
absolutely.
it's kind of much more Protestant and Lutheran. And
actually, when I went through this with doing the Chancellors, I wrote down next to each one Catholic or Protestant, and it's funny how it always points it out in their all biographies of them always mention it because it's so foundational in German politics. That Catholic. So Adenauer hates Prussians because he sees Prussians as Protestants, anti-Catholic, all these kinds of things. It's why he's actually quite keen on the idea of setting up West Germany. He's actually not, in some ways, he's actually not that bothered about losing East Germany because it's full of Prussians and he hates them and he blames them for Nazism. So Adenauer presides over Germany till 1960.
Well, but also, Dominic, just to say that his record under the Nazis, I mean, he sits it out, but he does get arrested, doesn't he?
Twice. He's in prison twice,
And
after the Night of the Long Knives and then again in the war.
And he tries to escape, gets arrested again, taken to the Gestapo cell, somehow manages to get out. So, I mean, he's
got a great record. He's got a great
record.
It's not surprising that the Germans voted him as their best German because, it's a great story. So he's a very old man. One thing he does do is he scraps denazification. So he says, basically, we can't go on having endless trials and interrogations and so on. We need to get the country back up on its feet and we need to shut this down. And effectively, he shuts it down pretty soon after taking over as Chancellor. And he prioritises recovery and rebuilding rather than kind of, accounting for all the sins. He says we can't account for all the sins of the past. Now, authors like Harold Yeaner say this is sort of poor stuff. But I suppose you could make an argument that from a point of view of pure pragmatism, because so many people were implicated in the Nazi regime to get Germany on its feet, especially given the pressure of the Cold War, he probably had to shut it down to some extent. But of course he then goes on to become a sort of founding father of European unification and so on.
And the alliance with France.
The alliance with France. He takes Germany to NATO, he rearms West Germany. So, and he's 87 when he retires. So he makes Joe Biden look like
and he remains head of the CDU until he's 90.
Yeah, ridiculous. I mean,
because the guy who succeeds him, Ludwig Erhard, never actually, although he leads a CDU government, never actually joins the CDU.
No, he's a very apolitical figure, actually, Ludwig Erhard. Just one last thing on Adenauer. An amazing fact I found. In 1957, in the Ministry of Justice, so 1957, this is sort of Volkswagen rebuilding Germany. Germany's cuddly again and the economic miracle is underway. In 1957, 8 out of 10 officials in the Ministry of Justice had been Nazis. So that's the sort of dark side, if you like, of the Adenauer regime. Now, Ludwig Erhard, we're talking about the World Wars. Here's a great sort of World War story. He's Bavarian, so a Catholic part of Germany, but he has a Protestant mother.
And he's raised as Protestant,
who raises him as a Protestant. Exactly right. And he fights in World War I on both fronts, and he's badly injured at the Fifth Battle of Ypres. Gary Sheffield would enjoy these facts. And
as my grandfather was.
Really? Mm. But your grandfather didn't become economics minister in a post-war German government.
No, so that
a notable man, no doubt, in his own right. But, and did your grandfather have his one arm shorter than the other?
Don't think so.
Ludwig Erhard did.
He looked excellent in a hat.
Did he? Yeah. Your grandfather or Ludwig Erhard?
My grandfather. Because I don't know whether Erhard.
I've seen pictures of Erhard in a hat, actually.
Did he
with Lyndon Johnson? Yeah, he looked very good. He kind of grinning,
he's a kind of roly-poly guy.
Yeah, very roly-poly. So he's not really one of life's politicians. So during the sort of 1930s, the Nazi era, he'd actually worked as an economist for the German finished goods industry, for the Association of Finished Goods Manufacturers. I don't actually know what
there was boring stuff
happening
before the Federal Republic.
Yeah, he sort of kept his head down, and he's a technocrat. Mid-60s, he falls after 3 years because he's seen as too pro-American, I think, by and large, and he's just not very political, and so he falls. And
so
now
we have a Nazi.
Yeah, so now we have this very, very interesting character. So imagine, I mean, if you were... So for a brief shining moment, he's the world's most famous Kissinger... or Kiesinger, as he's called, Kurt Georg Kiesinger. But then, of course, he's completely eclipsed by Henry Kissinger. Which is like you with Spider-Man, Tom.
Yeah, it is.
You know?
Yeah, so a certain degree of fellow feeling.
Yeah, well, you're not a Nazi and never have been.
True. No, that's true. So tell us about his record as a Nazi.
Well, first
of
all,
where he comes from and how he ends up as Chancellor.
He's from Baden-Württemberg in the southwest. Now he's the reverse of Ludwig Erhard. So he comes from a family of Protestants, but his mother was a Catholic and she brought him up as a Catholic.
And it's interesting, is it not? how many of them have a bit of both, a bit of Catholic and a bit of Protestant.
Very interesting. And also the mother being the sort of outsider who pushes them into her confession. And that sort of slight sense of outsiderness, I wonder if that plays a part. So this is my Freudian psychology.
Yes,
anyway,
no, but plugging into church history in an excellent way. It's good to see you. I finally got you.
So Kurt Georg Kiesinger, I mean, he's a careerist. So he joins the Nazi Party in 1933. There's only one reason you join the Nazi Party in 1933. It's that they're in power. Because if you're, that's why he's done it, obviously. And he has this, we can say, colourful history, working with Ribbentrop and Goebbels, producing propaganda, anti-Semitic propaganda.
Because he doesn't fight, does he?
No, he's a pen pusher.
He's a pen pusher who basically kind of ends up making propaganda for the Foreign Office.
So that's basically what he does, and he just does this consistently. Even after he knows that what's happening to the Jews. So after it's kind of common knowledge, he carries on doing it. So there's basically no, he's a kind of, at best you would say he's an amoral careerist. At the worst, you say he's just an utter Nazi.
And what's interesting about, so he is Chancellor, what, 66 to 69? So this is and has 1968 in the middle, slap bang in the middle of that term of office, when anxieties among teenagers, people in their early 20s, students, about Nazis.
So this is your genesis of the Baader-Meinhof group. This is your, he's very critical of, what he said about the baby boom generation? A shameful crowd of long-haired dropouts who need a bath and someone to discipline them. So, he's not holding back. He's leaning into his reactionary reputation.
So the CDU conference, he gets slapped, doesn't he?
Yes, he does.
By a protester. So I'm not surprised.
A Nazi hunter.
Hunter, yes.
She's Beate Karsfield, and she slaps him in the face at the CDU convention, while shouting at him, "Kiesinger, you're a Nazi, step down." So, I mean, it's all out there.
It's not good optics, is it?
No. And yet, this is what's fascinating. And actually, this takes me back to that book, Aftermath, about the aftermath of the Second World War. A lot of Germans, you don't often hear this now, and actually it's not part of almost the received narrative of sort of German post-war history. But a lot of Germans actually don't feel very apologetic about the Second World War, or indeed about Nazism. Opinion polls show that very clearly. Lots of people think, Hitler's problem was he went too far. And Kiesinger wins almost 50% of the vote in 1969.
Is that presumably more true of people on the right than the left? Or am I being unfair?
No, I'm sure that's true.
Voters there.
I'm sure that's true.
Because for the SPD, the left...
Yes.
I mean, that is different, isn't it? And so the guy who succeeds Kiesinger, Willy Brandt...
Great character.
I mean, he's a fabulous character.
Yes, he is.
Absolutely. I mean, his whole life is anti-fascist.
Anti-fascist. So, of course, he's not Willy Brandt.
No, it's
That's not his name,
isn't it?
It's an alias. Imagine if we had a British Prime Minister who governed in the 70s imagine if Ted Heath was an alias. or James Callaghan. So actually his real name is Herbert Frahm. And he's the son of a single-parent department store cashier who never knows his father.
In Lübeck, the home of marzipan.
Yes, exactly.
Incredibly beautiful city.
I've never been to Lübeck. Have you been to Lübeck?
I have. I've got a friend who lives in Lübeck.
Oh, very nice.
When
you visit, will you bring me back?
I said, you must buy marzipan. And I don't really like marzipan. But
I like marzipan a lot.
To be polite, I bought quite a lot.
When you next go, please bring me back some Lübeck marzipan. Anyway, we're getting off piste. So Willy Brandt, he's a socialist. He's, a card-carrying, absolute sort of quite hard left in the standards of the 20s. He flees Germany when the Nazis come in. He has to. He goes to Norway and Greece and Spain. And Willy Brandt is one of his many aliases. And when he comes back to Germany at the end of World War II, he decides, it's a better name than Herbert Frahm. Mm-hmm. And he ends up being mayor of West Berlin.
And I think he's right, isn't he? Because, I mean, it's a great name.
Yeah, it is a good name.
Yeah.
And he's built up hugely by Kennedy. So Kennedy identifies him quite early on and says, this guy's a tremendous fellow. We should sort of build him up. And Kennedy, obviously, when he goes to make his speech in West Berlin, Ich bin ein Berliner, Willy Brandt is at his side. and the Americans are very keen on Willy Brandt. But Willy Brandt is he's the voice of youth. He's the voice of, he says, we need more reform, we need more democracy in Germany. And he comes in 1969 as part of a coalition, I think, after Kiesinger is out, and he comes in.
I mean, he's kind of become more centrist, hasn't he? Since his early firebrand, socialist days.
absolutely.
And so he does. I mean, he's very pro-American. I mean, whether that's because
you have to be pro-American in West Germany, because America is defending you against.
I mean, but isn't he backing Vietnam and
I think
like
West,
that?
And that's one of the things that West German government supports. Yeah,
he's a Keir Starmer figure.
That really
cracking down on the left.
Keir Starmer has never been on the run.
No,
I don't see him as a man leading.
I withdraw that analogy. But he is also. I mean, the famous thing he does is Ostpolitik.
Ostpolitik, so basically recognising East Germany, exactly,
which none of the previous chancellors had done.
No, they basically said East Germany is illegitimate. He says, let's normalise relations, then we can both join the UN. The other thing he does, the one thing that he's very famous for in sort of outside Germany, and I found this fascinating when I discovered this. So this extraordinary moment in 1970 when he goes to Warsaw, to the memorial to the ghetto uprising in Warsaw.
Yeah.
And he kneels in this fantastic photograph, incredibly, it's a very moving moment. And is always taken, I think, in sort of Anglo-American textbooks and things. This is a sign of the new Germany and all this. What is absolutely fascinating is that a plurality of Germans did not agree with him. So 48% of West Germans thought that was wrong, to have knelt.
Why did they think it was wrong?
Well, can you not? I mean, they
Shameful,
thought it was wrong.
Yeah.
Unpatriotic. Unpatriotic. Too much. Grovelling. You don't have to. It's too dramatic. It's too. We shouldn't be doing that. We should be forgetting. A whole load of reasons which you can complete. If a British Prime Minister did it for something, at Amritsar, let's say, right, you can imagine the commentary. So it's kind of not dissimilar, I think.
Anyway, not to downplay the Amritsar massacre, but it's not quite on the scale of the Holocaust.
No, of course not. Of course not. I mean, but that's what's so interesting. That in 1970, even as lots of young Germans, the sort of Baader-Meinhof type people and their fellow travellers are saying, this place is full of Nazis, we haven't got over we've buried our guilt, we haven't admitted it and all this. Even at that moment, 48% of their fellow citizens are saying Brandt should not have knelt at the ghetto memorial. So he's very popular anyway, with sort of liberal-minded, intellectually kind of people, so artists and all this. Gunter Grass, exactly. But he has this, to use your brother's terminology, he is a massive lad. So
I think it's our terminology as well.
There's a lot going on with the ladies, and there's a lot of drink being taken, and he also suffers from depression.
And also he has a secretary, doesn't he? Yes. Who has turns out to have an unfortunate background.
Gunther Guillaume, I think his name is. So he's basically an East German spy.
Have you seen the brilliant Michael Frayn play about that?
No, I haven't.
Democracy.
Yeah.
It's really good. I think it was on at the National, it must have been 20 years ago or something like that. And it had Roger Allam, who is in...
was he Willy Brandt?
in Endeavour now. He was
very
Willy
good.
He was fabulous. Really fantastic. It still lives vividly in my memory. So ever since, Willy Brandt has been my favourite chancellor.
But Willy Brandt doesn't retire. He doesn't resign just because of the spy. The spy is kind of the trigger. He's sick of it anyway. He's exhausted.
I may have got that wrong then from the play.
There's a memorial to him. You love these walks. There's a memorial to Willy Brandt in Hammersmith.
Is there?
He donated when he was mayor of West Berlin a lamp or lantern and swapped it with Hammersmith. They twinned with some part of West Berlin, and it's still there with a little plaque underneath saying Willy Brandt.
I'll go and search that out.
Yeah, I don't think it's worthy of a podcast before you get excited.
No, but possibly worthy of a little stroll.
Okay, very good.
Yeah, I'll have a look.
Do we have time for one more before the break? Do you think?
Well, I think we should whistle through, because I think that the later ones will be kind of escalatingly more familiar.
We're about to get into my favourite one, though, Helmut Schmidt.
He was a Nazi as well.
Well, I think you're being harsh. So
he literally joined the Wehrmacht in 1937.
Wait a second. So he was in the Hitler Youth. He was kicked out of the Hitler Youth for not being a Nazi. for being anti-Nazi.
For being arrogant, I thought.
But then it's very ambiguous because he's then back in the Hitler Youth, and there are reports from his superiors saying he's a great Nazi. So he's a teenager. He's dithering. He doesn't know what he is.
We've all been there.
He's wrestling with his ideological convictions.
Yeah.
But yes, he has an amazing war. He fights on the Eastern Front. He's at the siege of Leningrad,
and on the drive on Moscow.
Yes, he's at the
trial.
The
evidence is stacking up here.
But he's a German. He's in the German army. I mean, he's about 12. I don't know. I mean,
he's signed up to the German army. He's attacking Moscow. He's laying siege to Leningrad.
He's at the trial of the Stauffenberg conspirators, but not on trial. He's just watching. And then he fights at the back.
And that, I gather, is what changed his
Is that
mind.
right? I didn't know that. I didn't know
that he goes there, and I think this is from Ulrich's book.
Yeah.
That he attends this hearing of the conspirators against Hitler, and it's only then that he realises that the Nazis are criminal. And he says this himself, apparently, in an interview that he did later in life. Too late, Schmidt added. He'd realised
that's
too
very
late. Yeah, so I think he was. So he was compromised, and then he kind of... He
admits his compromise, though, Tom. I like that about him.
He admits his compromise.
I knew
yes, he absolutely admits it. And
he goes on to fight. He still fights. He fights in the Battle of the Bulge. He fights in the Ardennes.
But I think he's on a journey by that point.
He's on his journey, right?
He's on a journey.
He's captured by the British, isn't he?
Yeah, well, he ends up becoming a Social Democrat.
He does indeed. So he takes over from Willy Brandt. He's very pro-European. He's very hard on the Baader-Meinhof group. He takes an incredibly hard line against them in the so-called, what's it called, the German... I can't remember what it's called. It's either called the German Spring, the German Summer, or the German Autumn. I can't remember which one of them. I'm sure it's not the German Winter.
Springtime for Germany.
Anyway, it's one of these things where the Baader-Meinhof are at their peak and they've kidnapped Hans Martin Schleyer, or whatever his name is, the head of the German business group, and it's all very big news. Anyway, he's a chain smoker. He's great pals with... Callahan, Gerald Ford. They go on holiday together when they've fallen from office. This is I'd love to writ a play about this.
Yeah, that's very Michael Frayn. He'd be a good play with that.
So they go on holiday. Henry Kissinger said he hoped what did he say? He hoped he died before Helmut Schmidt because he wouldn't like to live in a world that didn't have Helmut Schmidt in it.
He's obviously a man of incredible charm.
Which is a very nice thing. And the other thing is...
Charm and charisma.
When Margaret Thatcher became Britain's Prime Minister, Helmut Schmidt went around saying to all the other European leaders, this is going to be awful, she's the most dreadful bitch. This is what... But then he pitched up in London and they got on really well. Because she kind of had a bit of a fancy for kind of chain-smoking cabs.
Yeah, he's kind of Cecil Parkinson type.
He was, exactly.
Looks, didn't he? He had that.
And when he used to come to, they used to meet up, she used to say to him, I love talking to you because you're the only world leader I ever meet who's more right-wing than I am. Because although he's in the SPD, he's very kind of hard-line on some things. He'd become very hard-line economically. So... I'm a great fan of Helmut Schmidt. I think he's a great character.
He's obviously very, very charismatic, perhaps in a way that quite a lot of German chancellors deliberately haven't been.
Like Ted Heath, he was very big on the piano. He recorded piano music. He was arrested in later life for smoking against the smoking ban.
Massive lad.
Yeah, massive lad, exactly.
Yeah.
Contributed an article to a Festschrift for the philosopher Karl Popper. I mean...
he's the complete chancellor.
He's the German... I mean, maybe apart from the war, he's the German chancellor you'd want to be, isn't he?
Yes. Yeah, he is.
Now, maybe at this moment we should take a break. We haven't got to Angela Merkel yet, but I mean, maybe that's the story.
But we have the huge bulk of Helmut Kohl now looming towards us. So let's take a quick break, and then when we get back,
more Germans.
More Germans. Don't go away, Germans. We've got them.
Welcome back to The Rest is History. Today I read on Twitter from a satisfied listener to our James Bond podcast that what was great about The Rest is History's Bond podcast was that it wasn't full of the flippancy and cliches that you get from so many podcasts. Whether people will say that about this podcast, about post-war German politics, remains to be seen. But as Tom said, we now confront... the vast bulk of Helmut Kohl. So Helmut Kohl is probably the German chancellor who gives German chancellors not exactly a bad name. I mean, he's a colossus, isn't he? He's a political colossus.
In every sense.
But he is quite boring.
But isn't, again, I mean, we've said this throughout, that
the boringness is the point.
Being boring is a quality.
Yeah.
And if you're not boring, then there's a faint hint of suspicion, I guess, as happens with Schmidt.
Schmidt famously said there was talk about German politics lacking vision. And Schmidt said, if you're seeing visions, you need to consult a doctor.
Yeah.
And I think, yes, and some listeners to the podcast will say, this giggling about politicians being boring is typical of a British flippancy and a sort of deliberate nihilistic silliness, which has, sort of landed Britain in all
has resulted in Boris.
Right. And that actually, why are you laughing at Helmut Kohl being boring when actually Helmut Kohl is an incredibly serious and important figure?
Well, the father of modern Germany. Do you know who called him that? Margaret Thatcher.
Right. Well, Margaret Thatcher, of course, and Helmut Kohl have this terrible relationship.
But she admired him.
They're both on the centre-right. So she can't forgive him for German reunification, which she famously, what she says about German reunification? We defeated the Germans twice and now they're back, which is obviously not very constructive.
Well, basically felt the same, didn't he? The president of France.
But he didn't say it publicly.
No, he didn't say it publicly, but he was kind of, phoning up Mrs. Thatcher and they were...
Yeah, bemoaning
away about the Germans. Of course. But Mitterrand
there's this. I can't remember whether we talked. I think we did talk about this, but I enjoy it, so I'll talk about it again on our Anglo-German relations podcast. So she went over to visit Helmut Kohl in Germany, and they're obviously both centre-right leaders. They're both invested in the Cold War. They're both friends.
He's CDU. He's Catholic. He's from the Rhine.
Yes, they should get on fine, and actually he's determined that they will get on fine. And he takes her to the Palatinate. Rhineland-Palatinate, where he's from, and he takes her to his hometown of Oggersheim. I think all German politicians should come from somewhere called Oggersheim. He takes her to his favourite restaurants, and they have a lot of sausages and stuff. And then he takes her to the cathedral in Speyer in the Palatinate, where 8 Holy Roman emperors are buried.
Yeah, I've been there.
Have you? Is it a good cathedral?
Oh, it's fantastic. Yeah, if you love 10th and 11th century German history, there's nowhere better.
Which I do. Yeah.
No, I took the children there.
And did you? God, well, you should have gone with Margaret Thatcher. So Helmut Kohl. So he takes her in, and while they're behind a pillar or something, he says to Charles Pohl, her foreign policy guy, he says, "This is really important for me, this is the quote, it's absolutely crucial that Mrs. Thatcher knows I consider myself a European first and a German second." And he takes her around, he shows her the tombs and all that, and then she leaves, and the first thing she says is, "My God, that man is so German." And of course he is very German.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't work in Britain, but he works in Germany precisely because of the lack of colour, lack of vision, all of those kinds of things.
But to Mrs. Thatcher's credit, I think, the father of modern Germany, she wouldn't just say that.
No.
She didn't
Well, he is the father
come
of
out
modern
with
Germany.
guff. And clearly she could recognise, despite the fact that she didn't like him in the way that she'd obviously liked Schmidt, that he was a titanic figure.
Yeah.
Which he clearly was.
Because
he is the Chancellor who presides over the reunification of Germany.
And they do it so quickly, within a year.
So quickly and effectively and efficiently. And
it's very costly at the time, costly for everybody. It's costly for East Germans because they are disadvantaged, they're economically disadvantaged and so on. But, in the long run, it obviously worked and turned Germany into the powerhouse that it now is. There's an argument that had he delayed, people would have started to find objections and so on, but he really went for it. For a very kind of stolid-looking man, it was an act of almost swashbuckling kind of decisiveness. Absolutely played. He had a very sad ending, Helmut Kohl. So he had, I don't know if it was a stroke or something like that, but basically while he was in hospital, he ended up marrying somebody who was about 40 years younger than himself, who then kept him, well, this is contested, but basically his family claimed that she kept him as a virtual prisoner, and he fell out with the whole of the rest of his family. Very sad story.
Sad.
So that was the end of him. Anyway, he was replaced by a man who
absolute shyster.
Yeah.
Am I allowed to say that? Absolute.
So Gerhard Schroeder really shouldn't be a German politician. He's a British politician.
Yes.
He's a sort of Tory MP from the major government or something.
Yes, he is. He's made a fortune kind of flogging second-hand cars.
So his father was killed in World War II when he was a baby in Romania. He's a Lutheran. Well, nominally, I think he's actually an atheist. Grew up in Westphalia. Supposedly in 1982...
Are you reading this off from Wikipedia?
No, I'm reading off from my notes. My notes.
Sorry.
In 1982, he supposedly visited the federal chancellery drunk and shouted, "I want to get in, I want to get in." And eventually he did in 1988.
Amazing story.
But...
Because he was quite hard
Blairite.
left. He was quite hard left.
Oh, yes, yeah.
And
then moved.
Then he gets into power and he basically chums up with Tony.
Yeah, you should love him. He's third way. He's pure third way. So Blair, Clinton and Schroeder
really goes
with
kind of very, very... his economic policies are really quite right-wing.
Yeah, but I think actually the truth of the matter is politically he's been completely eclipsed by his behaviour. So he's been married 5 times. You know what the Germans call him? No. The Lord of the Rings. So previously,
they say Germans have no sense of humour.
Yeah, previously they called him, when he was married 4 times, his nickname was Audi Man. And then now they call him Olympic Man. I mean, he's a parody. His wives have become progressively younger. But the other thing is the Russia
his
stuff.
Hair. I mean, his
hair is shocking. Paul McCartney's sort of level. The other shocking thing about Gerhard Schroeder is the Russia stuff. So,
yes. Which is a story that will run with Merkel as well.
Yeah, he became a lobbyist for Gazprom and Rosneft and all these Russian companies. And, he spent his 70th birthday party in the Yusupov Palace in St. Petersburg, and the guest of honour was Vladimir Putin. And there's no doubt, I mean, he's being paid for a lot of this. He's just become, as you say, a complete and utter shill, basically, for the Putin regime.
And he's kind of huge behind the Nord Stream, bringing the Russian gas directly to Germany and bypassing Ukraine. And
so I think we're going to come to that, because this is obviously one of Angela Merkel's great legacies, is the Nord Stream gas pipeline. So now we've come to Angela. And, of course, this will be music to your ears, because her religious background
is crucial.
Is very important.
Which is why she opens the last chapter in Dominion.
I'd forgotten that.
Yeah,
I'm not blanking out Dominion. No. I mean, it's like Calais. It's engraved on my heart. But,
so each chapter begins with a scene. 21 chapters spanning 2,500 years, and the last one is Angela Merkel on TV in Rostock with a Palestinian girl who's a refugee who's come to Rostock for medical treatment and now has to go back. And she asks Merkel, "Why do I have to go back? I don't want to go back." And Merkel says, "Well, basically that's tough. It's the way things are. We can't have everyone over here." And the girl bursts into tears, and Merkel looks embarrassed. And then a few weeks later, in the face of the great migrant crisis, refugees from Syria and Afghanistan and so on crossing Europe, she unexpectedly opens the borders. And my thesis, which is not original to me because I think lots of people think it, is that this is very powerfully influenced by the parable of the Good Samaritan, which she would have absolutely absorbed at the feet of her father, who was a Lutheran pastor who, very unlike most people at the end of the war, are going from East Germany to West Germany. He goes from Hamburg to Berlin to keep the Lutheran fire alive in what's obviously going to become communist East Germany.
But it's not just the Lutheranism, though, is it? Isn't it also her sense of what we've been talking about in this podcast, of German history and of German guilt and Germany's obligations to the world?
Absolutely. But I also wonder, with her... So her father... when he goes there, there's this kind of Lutheran idea that, of church and state, that you don't really worry about what the state is. You focus on the church, which kind of enables him morally to live and work in East German society. But obviously Merkel has, she is still a kind of devout Lutheran, and it obviously does inform her morality and her politics and her seriousness, I think. Yeah. But when the Berlin Wall comes down and East Germany becomes part of West Germany and fused into the Federal Republic, she joins the CDU, the Conservatives, and Catholics, and she's a Lutheran. But I think that so her father was was called Red Kasner. So her father was, that was her maiden name. I wonder whether, as well as a kind of Christian commitment, she also inherited from that experience a kind of mistrust of wild idealism of the kind that her father had shown by going to East Germany. I don't know.
Her mother was deeply opposed to the move east. So they went against the mother's wishes. And obviously the fact that he was called, I find that fascinating that he was called Red Kasner, because I think he's called that because he clearly has left of centre sympathies.
Definitely, and that's what enables her to get the great education that she does.
Yeah, because what's interesting about her as well is that, and actually this does tie in with some previous chancellors, talking about Helmut Schmidt and the people who are in the Hitler Youth and so on. She is in, she works there's a lot of argument about this in Germany about exactly what she did, but she probably worked as a propaganda officer for the sort of, the main, state-sponsored communist youth organisation in the GDR. She was never anything vaguely, remotely resembling a dissident. And she's completely, she's been completely open about that. She sort of said it would be career suicide. It would be, very damaging for my family. This is obviously true of, millions upon millions of people in East Germany. She kept her head down and, sort of got on with it. And
well, she's not a radical, and it's always safety first.
Yeah,
and there's the famous story, isn't it, that when the Berlin Wall comes down, that she goes and has a look, and then she goes back because she's got to get up and she's got work the next morning.
It's the morning, exactly, absolutely, exactly right. And I think she won big student Russian competition. She worked. She had her head down for years. We're talking about 10 years or more. In science. You know what her thesis is, her research paper, Tom? Do you know the title of her research paper?
I don't.
It's Vibrational Properties of Surface Hydroxyls, Non-Empirical Model Calculations, Including Anharmonicities.
Well, what does that tell you?
Nothing. I don't know what any of that means.
Well, I guess what it might tell you is that, she has a Lutheran background, but she obviously has a background in hard science.
Yes.
Science operates according
to
laws.
And this is leading us towards who she's very similar to.
Yes, in so many ways, and yet in so many ways not, to Mrs. Thatcher, I guess.
To Margaret Thatcher. I think it's both scientists, both from, what we would call nonconformist or sort of low church backgrounds, and both consistently underestimated by their male opponents until the moment when they reveal themselves more opportunistic, more cunning. Helmut Kohl... She ended up stabbing him in the back at the end of the 1990s. So
he appoints her fairly quickly.
He does.
As Minister for Women in the CDU.
Just like Ted Heath and Margaret Thatcher, actually, she comes on board as a token woman. She's a pure... And Cole patronises her dreadfully. He goes around, he says, this is my Mädchen, this is my girl kind of thing. This is my little mascot from the East who I'm showing off. And he introduces someone like George Bush Senior in this incredibly condescending way. This is a woman who's been a research scientist for 10 years in the East. And then, quietly, all the time, people called her the snake in the 90s.
But the contrast with Mrs. Thatcher is that Mrs. Thatcher kind of made a virtue out of, the smoke and crash of battle.
Yeah.
She would advance towards fire.
Yes.
Whereas Merkel, it seems, has always done the opposite.
Yes, she has. And this is the criticism that you read in a lot of the commentary. That
it's not necessarily criticism, is it?
Well, no, because it's work. It's brilliant short-term politics, right?
But is it not also going with the grain of what Germans want?
Probably is.
You're
probably right.
Because again, if you compare it to Britain, one of the things about British politics that is Merkel's criticism of it is that it's flippant, it's short-term,
unnecessarily sensationalist and aggressive.
Sensationalist, kind of, rolling things on a throw of the dice, all that kind of stuff. Which you might say reflects the fact that Britain didn't undergo a fascist dictatorship, wasn't kind of, defeated in 2 world wars, wasn't divided, didn't have, a quarter of the country under communist dictatorship. So Britain is able to kind of treat recent history in a faintly flippant manner.
Yeah.
In a way that Germans can't and
absolutely
shouldn't.
Right. Yeah, absolutely right. that she has. How would you not have that sense if you'd grown up in East Germany? And if you'd grown up with that, the experience of the two world wars, the Holocaust and so on, Nazism, hanging over you, as all Germans have to this day, the interesting question, I suppose, is when that runs out. When will German politics become flippant? And
well, I mean, so if you think of Johnson with his kind of ironic, postmodern, yet also faintly serious identification with Churchill.
Yeah.
But it's all a bit of a joke. It's a kind of Oxford Union debating pose.
Yeah.
And you contrast that with the palpable influence that the experience of growing up under a communist dictatorship has had on Merkel. The difference in seriousness is obviously immense. I mean, who is to say, perhaps, extreme seriousness can be overdone? Because I do think, obviously the Johnsonian approach is all about let's create chaos, let's throw the dice, let's see what happens. And as the queues at petrol stations grow, we can see what some of the consequences of that might be. But equally, I suppose one of the criticism of Merkelism would be that she's incredibly reactive.
Yeah.
Is that fair? I mean,
yeah, I think it probably is fair. She
waits for crisis to blow up, and then she kind of responds to them.
Exactly.
And she often responds to them in ways that aren't necessarily great.
Well, a good classic example would be the Eurozone. So, if you're listening to the podcast from Portugal, Ireland, Greece or Spain, your take on Angela Merkel might be very different from, somebody's take in Germany. You would say she punished us, she made us clients of German manufacturing, made it impossible for us ever to be competitive because of the austerity put in place that came with the bailouts at the beginning of the 2010s. So yeah, I mean, I think there's a sort of fantasy, which by the way is brilliant politics. That I'm a pure pragmatic scientist,
but I'm also an idealist,
right? Making the right decisions, but kind decisions in the national interest, and that is. Yeah, the mutti kind of, yes. Exactly. I'm the nanny, mummy knows best.
You've got to go to bed early because it's for your own good, because you've got school tomorrow.
And it's slightly different. It's interesting, that sort of, that female archetype. I mean, I think one of the great stories of politics, actually, in the last 30, 40 years is what a terrible time women politicians have.
Well, she hates the nickname, doesn't she?
And she does. And how subject they are to stereotypes. I mean, Margaret Thatcher was always seen as the nurse who gives you the really harsh medicine. I mean, she sort of embraced that herself. Or the doctor who prescribes, you need to have both legs amputated to save your life. Merkel, it's exactly the mother who tucks you up at night with kind of soothing words. She gives you, the mother who serves you porridge, basically. She's not giving you something really horrible, not giving you something terribly nice either. But that sort of mother of the nation thing is part of her, is a very successful part of her persona. And actually, the contrast with Johnson, different political personas work in different environments. I mean, you've talked about this with Rome, with somebody like Nero. I mean, I know it's a ridiculous comparison, but different. Well, I mean, I think a politician needs to adjust their presentation to the expectations of the society they're living in, and what works in one will not work. Theresa May is actually in some ways a very good comparison with Angela Merkel, and she didn't work in Britain. She'd have probably worked much better in Germany. Yeah.
I mean, another kind of interesting contrast with Germany and both Britain and France is that when there was that tsunami and the nuclear reactor in Japan got crippled, that Merkel's response was actually one of seems of panic, closed down all nuclear reactors, with the result that Germany now, its carbon footprint is twice that of France or Britain.
I think the colossal amount of their energy they get from fossil fuels, something like a third or a quarter.
Which is also going back to the Nord Stream.
Right, well, this could be her biggest legacy, I think, actually.
So, obviously, we're recording this at a time when people are saying that there may be power cuts in Britain because of the lack of gas, and we've got queues of petrol stations and all kinds of things. So energy crisis seems very salient here. But actually, Germany's energy crisis is, in the long term, kind of much more crippling.
Well, is it an energy crisis? I mean, they've got a deal with Russia.
Well, it depends if you put the energy crisis in the context of global warming, of the kind of the the kind of the macro level that actually, to give him credit, Johnson at least is affecting to care about.
Talk about with his Muppets references.
And his references to Sophocles, to be fair to him. So part of the one of the kind of consequences of Johnsonian flippancy is that you can just suddenly kind of change your mind. You know, I mean, he was massively anti-green, and now suddenly he's going on about Kermit.
Yeah, I think that's true, and I think there's all kinds of questions about that Nord Stream project. So for people who don't know, this is, as Tom said, this pipeline that goes basically from Russia to Germany. It bypasses Eastern Europe, the Baltic states. So what it does is it makes Germany dependent on Russian natural gas. But it means that, in a way, you can sell out those countries in between those two places. And actually, Germany, one of the stories that's never reported in Britain or America about Germany, is in the last 10 years, Germany has become one of Russia's key trading partners. There are all kinds of links. We talk about Gerhard, right? Yeah, and China's. We talk all kinds of things. We talk about Gerhard Schroeder, sort of lobbying links and all these kinds of things between Germany and Russia. Angela Merkel spoke to Vladimir Putin every week on the phone. I mean,
even though she hated dogs.
Well, he did this.
And he notoriously.
Yeah. It's weird that he would do that when she's one of his pals. That he got this big black Labrador to sort of stalk around her. And I mean, the photos are actually
that's kind of
it's very
KGB
Russian,
one-upmanship.
very But they would speak sometimes in Russian. They'd speak he speaks German, she speaks Russian, and she believed that she had almost a unique insight among Western leaders into Russia's mindset.
But I mean, against the fact that she has cozied up to Russian gas suppliers and so on, and she's cut Viktor Orban a lot of slack, because even though they obviously have completely contradictory opinions, say on refugees, a lot of German manufacturing is in Hungary and so on. So she's very kind of practical, maybe cynical, one might say, on that score. Mm-hmm. But I think the reason that Remainers in Britain love her is that she has put the integrity of the European Union and Germany's dominant position within it kind of centre stage. So to that extent, she has kind of stuck up for Western values. Well,
I think she has a vision of the EU that absolutely does have Germany centre stage. And I think Germany is more, now that Britain has left the EU, obviously Germany is now 20% of the population, more than 20% of the GDP. France is probably the only counterweight. I mean, effectively, the EU has become more and more a German project.
And it's interesting with obviously the Franco-German relationship throughout this period has been central, right the way back to Adenauer.
Yeah, far more than the Anglo-German.
Oh, completely. But Kohl and Mitterrand
standing
together in cemeteries is kind of one of the defining images of the 80s, isn't it?
Absolutely.
But again, Macron has been pushing Merkel to kind of beef up European defence. I mean, that's the backdrop to the bust up with the British and American, Australian submarine thing. Is that actually it's not only Britain that's let him down; it's also Germany.
The French want a friend. They just want a friend.
Well, Macron wants a Europe that, as every French president has done, wants a Europe that can, and led by France, that is effectively independent of America.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right.
He's been pushing Merkel to do that, and she hasn't wanted to do it.
Well, I mean, that's partly because of this legacy that's hung over the whole podcast. Yeah. The World War legacy. I mean, I know this seems like a parody of a sort of British history podcast talking about Germany. The kind of Basil Fawlty don't mention the war. But I don't think you can not mention it. I think it's absolutely, you visit Berlin now and it is still there. And what it gave Germans was a consciousness unmatched in Europe of the sort of dangers of militarism, the damage that impassioned political rhetoric can do. I mean, just to describe the horrors that Germans endured in the 20th century, the dictatorships of left and right, you're in a different universe from anything in Britain, or indeed in France, actually, even with the occupation.
The other thing that we haven't really talked about, and it reflects the fact we're definitely not a politics podcast, is of course that it's almost always dependent on coalitions.
Yes.
And we see that now that basically, the CDU and the SPD both got the same number of votes. And so there's going to be lots of horse trading, and so probably Merkel will remain Chancellor for weeks, maybe months.
So you don't get the bear pit adversarialism.
Yeah, and so that
politics.
obviously also is a difference, and is a structural one, again, designed to keep the spectre of dictatorship at bay. That's not in any way a profound observation.
No, I think it's a good observation.
I thought we should kind of just chuck that into the mix.
I think, do you know what, Tom? The producer
have we
said
sorted Germany out now?
The producer said to us before we started, maybe 20, 25 minutes, and we've wittered on for an hour. So I think we should definitely call a halt. And I will go off to contemplate my signed photographs of Helmut Schmidt. And you can go and do whatever German activity seems to you fitting.
I'm actually going to go and watch the Sopranos film.
Oh, very good.
Which isn't German at all.
This is exactly the sort of louche life that the listeners will.
It's the kind of lifestyle that I'm advertising on the Guardian.
Talking of films,
yes.
We are doing a very exciting event, aren't we?
Yes, we are. And the Odeon Leicester Square.
At the Odeon Leicester Square. This is the first time we've spoken about it publicly on this podcast. It's on the 14th.
We're going to be doing
of November.
14th of November. We're going to be doing history and the cinema.
Yeah,
the cinema.
In what could be more appropriate? And I don't think the tickets have yet gone on sale. Maybe they have. Maybe they haven't. Check our channels on Twitter. We will advertise the tickets. There are lots of them. We'd love to see as many listeners as possible. We should be talking about some very entertaining films, some controversial choices as well. Including one that I think I described as the worst portrayal of a bottom in cinema history. Well, if that's not enough to get you... Yeah. I mean, what else would you rather be doing on a Sunday afternoon? So on that note, we will see you next time. Thank you for listening to The Rest is History. Bye-bye. Auf Wiedersehen.
Thanks for listening to The Rest is History. For bonus episodes, early access, ad-free listening, and access to our chat community, please sign up at restishistorypod.com. That's restishistorypod.com.